When the raids ended and the headlines faded, most believed the story of the architect had reached its conclusion. But somewhere deep within the recovered ledger was a single entry that refused to fit. Case 2047. Minor. No documentation. Relocated. No name, no country, just a note scrawled in uneven handwriting. At first, investigators assumed it was a bookkeeping error. Thousands of entries had passed through the ghost factory. One more could easily have been misfiled. But then a young data analyst, exhausted after a 12-hour shift, noticed something buried in the metadata. A date that predated the network's collapse by 6 years, tied an address that no longer existed, an orphanage outside Bucharest. What began as a footnote became the opening of a new file, the Bucharest child. The orphanage was gone now, closed after corruption scandals and forgotten in the bureaucratic fog. But locals still remembered the place. The caretaker, an elderly woman named Ioana Petrescu, recalled a day in 2013 when a foreign couple arrived with legal-looking documents and a translator who spoke with calm authority. The couple claimed to be part of an international adoption agency. They signed forms, handed over envelopes, and left with a quiet, dark-haired boy of about 7 years old. They said his name was Mihai, she told reporters later. But that wasn't his name. His real name was Alexandru. For years, no one had asked about the boy again, until investigators from the task force reopened the trail. The paperwork used in that adoption turned out to be part of the same identity-forging network the architect had built. The signatures were fake. The seals came from an official in another country entirely. And the translator who vouched for the documents had since disappeared. The question wasn't just who took the boy. It was why. When agents ran the serial numbers from the fake documents to the ledger system, they found something chilling. Mihai's passport number was connected to several offshore accounts, each containing large transfers labeled simply Asset 47. Someone had paid to erase a child, not to kidnap him for ransom or adoption, but to make him vanish from record. From there, the search stretched across continents. In Germany, an NGO worker recalled a child with the same scar above his eyebrow who had appeared at a refugee center under a different name 2 years later. In Spain, school records showed a boy with identical handwriting enrolled for 6 months before disappearing again. Each clue led somewhere, but nowhere for long. For the investigators, the case became personal. One of them, Detective Elena Kovacs, had lost her own brother to child trafficking decades earlier. She pushed harder than anyone, cold calling old sources, combing through classified adoption archives, even visiting the ruins of the orphanage herself. In an interview years later, Kovacs described the moment she found the breakthrough. It wasn't a photo. It wasn't DNA. It was a drawing, a child's drawing. Among the debris of the closed orphanage, she discovered a rusted filing cabinet. Inside, wrapped in plastic, were dozens of drawings the children had made. Most were simple: stick figures, sun and grass, houses. But one showed an airplane, a passport, and 3 figures: a man, a woman, and a child holding hands. Beneath it, written in small block letters, was a single word: new. The drawing style matched the boy's file. To Kovacs, it was both heartbreaking and hopeful. He had understood, even at 7, that he was being taken away, not adopted, but replaced. Interpol's analysts reconstructed the timeline and discovered that the fake adoption coincided with a diplomatic transfer involving a minor government official from a wealthy nation, someone who later resigned quietly and moved to another identity himself. Whether coincidence or connection, no one could say for sure. But one detail stood out. A flight manifest from that same week showed 3 passengers traveling on consecutive seat numbers. 2 adults, 1 child, all using passports issued within the same 2-day window, from the same batch number as those found in the architect's cache. The boy's trail reemerged briefly 5 years later. In a small border town in southern France, a social worker documented an encounter with a teenager who spoke Romanian but carried no papers. He refused to give his name, but carried a single item in his pocket: a torn photograph of an old woman holding his hand, Ioana, the caretaker. By then, the task force was gone, disbanded after funding cuts and shifting priorities. Kovacs worked unofficially, using her own savings to chase the leads others had abandoned. When she arrived in that French town, the teenager was already gone. Local police assumed he had crossed into Spain or vanished into the migrant system again. But the drawing, the ledger entry, and the photograph told a story the records couldn't. Someone had built a life on stolen paper, and somewhere inside that false life was a lost child who never chose to disappear. For Kovacs, the search became a mission that blurred the line between justice and obsession. "You can't just close a folder," she said later, "because every folder is someone's life." The final moments of this chapter close on her alone in a train station at night, holding that torn drawing under the cold fluorescent lights. The child's message to the world, frozen in crayons and hope. She folds it gently, tucks it into her pocket, and whispers, "We'll find you." The hunt for the boy isn't over. It's only moving underground, into a new kind of darkness, one where names mean nothing and faces change faster than memory. When Detective Elena Kovacs reopened the case file, the boy's name was still redacted, a blank rectangle where a life should have been. The system that had erased him was efficient. It didn't delete records, it rewrote them. Somewhere, a different child now existed under his passport number, while the real Alexander Petrescu had become a ghost in plain sight. Kovacs began with the only clue she could trust, the ledger code Asset 47. It appeared again inside the encrypted archive seized during the architect's trial, numbers buried among offshore transactions routed through shell charities and adoption assistance groups. Each transaction ended in the same destination, a small trust fund registered in Luxembourg under the name Altria Foundation. On paper, Altria was a humanitarian organization. In reality, it was a funnel, a financial ghost created to clean payments for a handful of powerful clients. When Kovacs traced its directors, she found nothing but proxies, retired accountants, deceased notaries, even one identity confirmed to belong to a man who had died 20 years earlier. Yet one detail stood out. A recurring payment made every spring to a private medical facility in Zurich. The memo line read simply, Ward E. Maintenance. At first glance, Ward E. seemed ordinary, a research unit specializing in pediatric neurology. But records showed it had no registered patients, only long-term observational subjects. The payment from Altria had been steady for 12 years. That was when Kovacs realized a horrifying possibility. The boy might not have been adopted or lost. He might have been kept. She contacted a journalist who had covered the architect's trial, Jonas Meyer, a Swiss freelancer known for persistence bordering on recklessness. Together, they built a timeline of the Foundation's movements. Documents filed, bank transfers, even property leases. Each led closer to Zurich, until one lease revealed a name, Dr. Mark Ettlinger, a neurologist previously funded by a defense contractor research wing. Ettlinger's specialty, identity reconstruction after trauma. His papers discussed neurological imprinting in juvenile subjects. To Kovacs, that sounded less like therapy and more like programming. So she and Meyer went to Zurich. Wardy sat behind high iron gates, sterile and quiet. The receptionist wore no badge. The sign outside listed only initials. When Kovacs introduced herself as a researcher for a missing child foundation, she expected the usual stonewalling. Instead, the woman froze for half a second too long. Recognition, fear, or guilt, before replying, "We have no such records." But later that night, an anonymous envelope arrived at Meyer's hotel. Inside, a USB drive. No note, no sender. On it, a single file labeled Patient M 2047. The footage lasted 12 minutes. It showed a small hospital room, clean but colorless. A boy of about 12 sat drawing quietly while a doctor asked questions in French. His accent was Eastern European. He identified himself as Michael Petrescu, a name halfway between his real one and the false one given by the traffickers. When asked if he remembered Romania, he hesitated and said, "Only a dream. My home had red roofs." Kovacs watched the clip in silence. After years of searching, she was staring at the ghost she'd chased through continents. The boy was alive, but he didn't know who he was. The next morning, Meyer wanted published immediately. Kovacs refused. "If we expose him now," she said, "they'll move him again." Instead, they leaked the file quietly to Interpol's Child Protection Division. Within a week, Wardy was placed under audit. By the time authorities arrived, every hard drive was wiped, every patient relocated. Only the empty beds remained, sheets still warm. Someone inside the system had warned them. Kovacs and Meyer became targets of a different kind of pressure. Polite threats disguised as bureaucratic delays. Their credentials were questioned, travel clearances revoked, funding frozen. Anonymous messages arrived in her inbox. Stop digging. He's safe. But she couldn't stop. The boy's face haunted her. Digging deeper into Altria's archives, Meyer uncovered one final trail. Correspondence between a board member and a government contractor labeled Project Mariner. The memos described identity reassignment for sensitive dependents of diplomatic personnel. Translation: people too politically inconvenient to exist. Children of spies, defectors, whistleblowers, hidden under new lives to erase history. Was Alexander one of them? Or had his stolen identity simply been recycled to cover someone else's child? The documents didn't say. All they proved was that the machinery of disappearance was still running, long after the architect's arrest. Kovacs realized she was now fighting ghosts built by governments, not criminals. And ghosts sanctioned by law cannot be arrested. Her final attempt came through unofficial channels. A former Swiss nurse who had worked at Ward, he contacted her anonymously. He asked about an old woman. The nurse wrote. He drew her every day. She attached a scanned image, a charcoal sketch of Ioana Petrescu, the caretaker from the orphanage. The boy's memory had survived the rewrite. Somewhere inside the new name, the real Alexander was still fighting to be seen. Kovacs arranged one last meeting with Meyer in a train station cafe. The mood was heavy, but there was a spark of triumph. They had proof. Fragments, yes, but proof that the network hadn't died. Meyer recorded their conversation on his phone. What happens if we publish? He asked. Kovacs stared at the passing trains. Maybe nothing, she said. Maybe someone finally starts asking why a child's name is worth more than his life. She smiled faintly, exhausted. Either way, the ghost won't stay quiet forever. Hours later, when Meyer tried to reach her, her phone was dead. Her apartment showed signs of hurried departure. Documents gone, laptop missing, window left ajar. No forced entry. No witnesses. Interpol logged her disappearance under a new file, Case 3051, investigator missing. And so the story folded in on itself. Another name erased, another identity swallowed by the machine she tried to destroy. But in a remote shelter across the border, weeks later, a teenage boy with no passport and a scar above his eyebrow handed a volunteer a folded piece of paper. On it was a sketch of a woman holding his hand beneath the words, "Find her." The cycle had begun again. Only this time, the ghost was learning how to haunt back. For weeks, darkness swallowed the case. Elena Kovacs was gone. Her notes, her encrypted drives, her research, all vanished within hours. To outsiders, it looked like burnout, a disappearance brought on by obsession. But those who had worked beside her knew better. Kovacs had never run from a case in her life. What the public didn't know, what even Interpol failed to understand, was that the last person to see her alive wasn't an informant, a colleague, or a threat. It was Alexandru. The teenager who had slipped through borders and shelters like a shadow had found her first. He had watched from across the train station, clutching the drawing he'd made of Ioana Petrescu. He recognized Kovacs from the photos pinned inside the abandoned wardie. She was a woman who kept searching, the one whose name appeared in patient whispers and in half-scrubbed notes left in doctors' files. He approached her minutes after Meyer left the cafe, but whatever he said, whatever truth passed between them, left with both of their footsteps. 2 days later, Alexandru resurfaced. Not physically, digitally. A volunteer at a border shelter discovered a USB drive shoved under the door. On it was a single audio file, time-stamped the night Kovacs disappeared. Her voice, calm, strained, but unmistakably hers, spoke over a backdrop of distant traffic. If you're hearing this, they know who I am. They know who he is. There's no time. Take this to Jonas. Tell him the boy remembers more than they think. The recording ended abruptly, followed by the scrape of a chair, a faint gasp, and silence. It was the first ghost in a haunting that would soon spread across continents. While agencies traded blame and politicians denied involvement, a different kind of investigation began, one not led by governments, but by people who refused to forget the child lost in the paperwork. Jonas Meyer, working from an encrypted laptop in a safe apartment in Lyon, pieced together Alexandru's movements from CCTV leaks, border logs, and anonymous messages. The boy had traveled across 4 countries on foot and by stowing away on freight trucks. He had vanished from official systems, yet left traces in unofficial ones: charity rosters, clinic waiting lists, handwritten sign-ins at migrant shelters. One detail stood out. Everywhere he went, he left drawings, dozens of them. Some were crude sketches of the old orphanage. Some showed the cracked passport used to erase him. But most were 2 figures, a woman with short dark hair and a child holding her hand. Elena and Alexandru. Even erased identities leave fingerprints, Meyer realized. But Alexandru left something stronger: memory. Memory the system failed to rewrite. As Meyer followed Alexandru's trail through encrypted networks, he discovered a cluster of servers still operational, remnants of the identity forging ring believed to be broken. These servers were hidden under diplomatic protections, masked behind humanitarian organizations, and routed through universities and research clinics. At the center of the network sat a new code name: the conservator, not the architect. Someone worse. Someone who kept what the architect built alive. Evidence showed they oversaw reintegration protocol, a sanitized term for relocating erased individuals into new identities. Children, defectors, political liabilities, and assets too risky to appear in public record. In the logs, Meyer found a reference to Subject M 2047, pending relocation freeze due to memory regression. Memory regression. Those 2 words explained everything. Alexandru's memories of Romania, of Ioana, the orphanage, had begun returning, slowly, painfully, and unpredictably. The system wasn't designed for that. Children weren't meant to remember who they were, and once they did, they weren't meant to survive. The ghosts who refused to disappear. The breakthrough came not from police raid nor legal subpoena, but from a late-night call to Meyer's phone. A shaky teenage voice whispered 2 words before the line cut. Help her. It was Alexandru. Meyer traced the call to an abandoned textile factory near the Swiss border. When police arrived, they found 2 sleeping bags, an empty water jug, and a torn notebook filled with sketches. On the final page was a drawing unlike the others. Not Ioana, nor Kovacs, nor himself. It showed a building, tall and imposing, with a distinctive circular logo above the door. A logo Meyer recognized, the emblem of the Altria Foundation. Alexandru wasn't running from his past. He was hunting the people who stole it. When Meyer reached the building, it was nearly dawn. The Foundation offices appeared closed, lights off, curtains drawn. But through a side window, he saw movement, the silhouette of someone pacing, speaking sharply into a phone. He wasn't alone. A second shadow moved near the back exit. Smaller, leaner, familiar. Alexandru. He wasn't there to break in or retaliate. He was there for proof of who he was, who took him, and what they did to Kovacs. Before Meyer could call out, a van turned the corner. Dark, unmarked, moving too slowly to be casual. Alexandru looked up and froze. The conservators' people had arrived. Meyer shouted for him to run, but the sound was drowned by the screech of tires. A door swung open. A figure stepped out. For a single moment, Alexandru looked straight at Meyer, eyes wide with something between fear and resolve. He dropped something to the ground, a folded paper. Then he disappeared into the darkness as the van sped away. By the time police arrived, the building was empty again. No forced entry. No signs of struggle. Only the paper Alexandru left behind. On it was the same drawing he always carried. The woman with short dark hair holding his hand. But this time, he added a third figure beside them, a man in glasses. Jonas Meyer. Meyer folded the paper and whispered the truth he'd been avoiding. He knows he can't finish this alone. Somewhere out there, Alexandru was alive, the only child to ever break through an erased identity. and the only witness left who knew what happened to Kovacs. The system that created ghosts was still alive, but now one of those ghosts was fighting back. And the hunt for the boy, for Kovacs, for truth, had only just begun.